let's head to Tokyo now, where some of the most anticipated athletic events are set to begin tomorrow. The track, field and road events traditionally bring Africa its biggest haul of medals at the Olympic Games. Let's cross over now to our correspondent, Adam Hunt, in Tokyo for more. Adam, of course, athletics is being highly anticipated across the continent, but what's the feeling amongst the teams in Tokyo?
Well, I think they can't wait to get going, Lindy. It has been such a long road for all of these athletes to get here to the Olympics over the past couple of years. All of the uncertainty surrounding COVID, the protocols they've had to go through, the travel situation to get here to compete in Tokyo. But it will be an athletics event like no other when the track and field commences in this amazing Japan National Stadium here behind me. It was rebuilt. Over $1 billion was spent by Japan on the stadium specifically for these games to host the Olympics, and it will be a fraction of the 65,000 capacity that will actually be inside the stadium, with hearing numbers in the in the high hundreds, perhaps just over 1,000 in terms of the number of people in there. So it will be very, very different atmosphere for the athletes, and it'll be interesting to see how they're affected by that, because we've seen in some of the other events already at the Olympics, in the indoor events, the swimming, for example, the gymnastics, actually despite no spectators because of the state of emergency here in Tokyo, the atmosphere has actually been quite good because of the teams in there. The number of people supporting other athletes has meant that the atmosphere has been quite good, but I think it's going to be noticeable inside the stadium behind me once those events get underway, just how empty it is, and the lack of atmosphere will be something for those athletes to deal with.
Well, certainly another unwelcome aspect when it comes to the atmosphere might be bad weather. There have been some worrying warnings over the past few days. Adam, how's the forecast looking for tomorrow, and might the weather impact the events?
Well, thankfully, the tropical storm that was called Napatak that hit this part of Japan over the last couple of days, most of that bad weather has moved through, which brought storms, wind and rain that made it quite difficult for the events a couple of days ago. A few had to be delayed from the weekend into Monday and Tuesday, but that's passed through. But what has returned is the really hot and humid conditions that we've had here in Tokyo. Unseasonably warm temperatures, really well over 30 degrees. It's going to be around 30 and 100 degrees Fahrenheit inside the stadium once those athletics events and the track and field begin tomorrow. So that's going to be something that the athletes are going to have to deal with. And we've seen how that's impacted the athletes in other sports. The tennis, for example, Ash Barty losing in the women's singles first round, the Wimbledon champion, the world #1 as well, saying afterwards that the heat was just oppressive, so difficult for her to deal with. Novak Djokovic, another tennis player, discussing that. The cyclist a couple of days ago speaking about the heat. IOC officials have referred to it in press conferences over the last day or so, saying they're doing what they can, providing water and ice to the athletes, but it's going to be a factor, and it'll be interesting to see how it affects the athletes that take to this stadium behind me tomorrow and for the coming days.
And of course, on top of that, athletes are also having to contend with the coronavirus pandemic. We know, of course, the Olympic Committee is doing everything it can to keep cases under control, but how is this pandemic affecting the athletes?
Yeah, Lindy, the COVID situation actually for the last few days had really bubbled under the surface. After all of those protests we saw in the lead up to the Games, it wasn't really grabbing the headlines, the numbers, I think also because of some of the other things that were taking place, the Simone Biles situation, the gymnastics, and the focus really had been more on the sport over the last 2 days or so. But COVID has reared its head in the last 24 hours. Very high numbers, both inside the bubble and outside. Just to give you the latest figures, we've had 24 new cases inside what's being called the bubble by the IOC. So that's people connected with the Games, the athletes, the coaches, the delegates, the media like us. And that is the highest number they've seen since records began on July the 1st. And also outside the bubble, in the wider Tokyo population, the numbers are really high too. 3,865 new cases in the last 24 hours, which again is the highest figure they've seen since records began. Way higher even than the figures they were seeing 6 months ago in mid-January, when the levels were high too here in this part of Japan. So quite worrying figures, and it's starting to affect the athletes too, we've been told in the last couple of hours or so. Speaking of the track and field, Sam Kendricks, the US star in the pole vault, who is expected to perhaps win a medal here in Tokyo, he has tested positive and has to pull out of the games. So disappointment for the athletes, and it's a story that we're going to have to focus on, I think, over the next couple of days.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that. Adam Hunt joining us there from Tokyo.